Good day, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. Thanks for joining us. You know the drill. Subscribe if you haven't. Like if you do. Leave me a comment below. Hit that little bell for notifications. And yes, you can check us out on any of your favorite podcasting apps. Well, as you may noticed, that's right, I'm casual. Why? I'm in the studio here on Sunday doing some content for you all because I will be in a homicide trial this week. I think it will be a quick homicide trial, as homicide trials go, and I can talk a little bit more about it when it's over, but it should be quick. All right, we'll just leave it at that. All right, so we have some content for you today. Now, if you watch regularly, you know that I was recently in Sweden for 10 days. The lovely Miss Kristen had a family reunion over there, so we had the pleasure of going to meet everybody. Well, while we were in Stockholm, we took a tour because that's what tourists do when you go to cities and you want to get the lay of the land and figure out what's going on there. And I'm sure everybody has heard of the Stockholm syndrome, whereby, the captors become sympathetic to the individuals that are holding them captive. It happens. It's not the first time it happened, but you obviously have heard of the Stockholm syndrome. So I was aware of it. I knew generally what it was, but did you know the backstory? I didn't. So I've done some research, obviously took the tour, and let's talk about the Stockholm syndrome. So let's get to it. So today we're going to explore the intricate dynamics of human psychology in extreme situations. So as the host of Crime Talk, we're going to delve into the Stockholm syndrome, a psychological phenomenon where victims develop empathy, loyalty, or even positive feelings towards their captors amid danger or abuse by the captors. Now, this term stems from a pivotal event. It was the 1973 bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. So let's take a look at the details and how it all unfolded, and then, try to put on our psychologist hats and do a little psychological analysis, drawing on this case as the foundational study. All right. So let's begin with a little historical context. All right. So on August 23rd, 1973, it was a routine morning at the Severas Kreditbanken in Normanstad Square, Stockholm. Now, I'm sure I probably slaughtered the pronunciation of that. My apologies. But that normal morning was shattered by a robbery. The perpetrator, Jan-Erik Olsen, a 32-year-old convict on temporary prison leave, entered the bank armed with a submachine gun. He discharged shots into the ceiling, declaring, quote, "The party starts," end quote, and swiftly took 4 employees hostage. Birgitta Lundblad, she was 31, Kristen Enmark, she was 23, Elizabeth Oldgren, 21, and Sven Safström, who was 24. Now, Olsen's demands were pretty clear and quite bold. $3 million in Swedish kron, or the equivalent of about $700,000 at the time, a getaway vehicle, perhaps a bulletproof vest or two, some helmets, and the release of his former cellmate who was still in prison. Well, this incident, lasting 6 days, not only gripped the international headlines at the time, but also inspired the term Stockholm syndrome, coined by criminologist and psychiatrist Niels Bergljot, who advised the police during the hostage situation. So let's take a look at the timeline of this ordeal. On the first day, Olsen's action set the stage for a prolonged standoff. By partially complying with his demands, the police released Clark Olofsson, who had joined Olsen inside the bank. What about, we don't negotiate with terrorists kind of things? Anyway, Olofsson assumed a dual role, complicit in the hostage-taking, yet serving as a calming negotiator. And so over the subsequent days, from August 23rd through the 28th, the hostages were confined in a narrow bank vault measuring about 3 meters by 14 meters. Bound intermittently, they shared space with their captors, leading to unexpected interactions. Now, moments of conversation fostered a semblance of camaraderie. A notable event occurred on the second day when Kristen Enmark phoned Swedish Prime Minister Olof Palme, and she voiced frustration with the police's aggressive approach, asserting that she felt safer with the robbers than with law enforcement. Well, Enmark expressed trust in Olofsson and feared a police assault could endanger everyone in the bank. And as the standoff progressed, empathy deepened. Olsen offered his jacket to a shivering Enmark, and Olsen's charisma built rapport with the hostages. Captors were permitted minor comforts such as supervised bathroom access. Crucially, the hostages grew distrustful of the police, perceiving them as the greater threat amid sounds of drilling and plans for tear gas deployment. In their view, Olsen and Olsen became protectors. Can you imagine? Anyway, the resolution came on August 28th when police deployed tear gas, compelling everyone from the vault. Now, remarkably, the hostages shielded their captors, imploring officers not to harm them. And no physical injuries occurred, and Olsen and Olsen were arrested as the hostages were freed. So what took place then? Well, in the aftermath, the hostages' behavior defied expectations. They declined to testify against Olsen and Olsen in court, actually went and visited them in prison, and continued to keep in contact with their captors. Reports suggested that Kristen Enmark grew particularly close to Olsen, with the unconfirmed rumors of romantic sentiments. Now, the hostages even fundraised for the robbers' legal defense team, expressing gratitude for their unharmed release. Well, ultimately, Olsen received a 10-year prison sentence for the robbery and kidnapping, and he was released in 1980, while Olsen's ambiguous involvement led to a lighter penalty. Both later resumed criminal paths, though Olsen eventually expressed remorse. The hostages, that was led by Enmark, criticized the police tactics, believing they heightened risks to their own lives. Now, this even prompted Niels Berjot to term the hostage empathy Normanskjöld syndrome, later known as Stockholm syndrome. Now, Berjot attributed it to a survival mechanism where victims align with captors to mitigate threats. And the concept gained prominence through cases like the 1974 kidnapping of Patty Hearst, who joined her abductors, the Symbionese Liberation Army. Now, let's take a look at some of the psychological underpinnings of the Stockholm syndrome. Well, not formally recognized in any diagnostic manual such as the DSM-5 or the ICD-11, but it does offer some insights into trauma responses. Now, the Stockholm case illustrates several mechanisms. First, survival instincts and dependency. In life-threatening scenarios, victims may bond with the captors for protection. And the hostages relied on Olsen and Olsen's for essentials, and gestures like the jacket reinforced that gratitude. Second, cognitive dissonance. To manage stress, hostages rationalized their captors' actions, viewing them as less menacing than the police. And third, trauma bonding. Prolonged proximity marked by fear, interspersed with relief, foster emotional ties akin to abusive relationships. Now, Olsen's charm and Olsen's kindness kind of amplified this. Fourth, fear of the authorities. So distrust of the rescuers, as seen in the hostages' apprehension towards police raids, draws victims actually closer to their captors. And fifth, then you have a power imbalance. Helplessness prompts victims to adopt captors' viewpoints for perceived control, evident when hostages protected Olsen and Olsen. Now, in this specific case, isolation in the vault intensified reliance, while group dynamics among hostages reinforced empathy. Charismatic elements, particularly from Olsen, facilitated bonds as well. So, let's look at the broader analysis and let's see what it reveals. It reveals an evolutionary roots where aligning with aggressors may have aided ancestral survival. However, controversy still persists. Critics argue that the syndrome pathologizes rational victim strategies. Enmark herself described her actions as strategic survival, not affection, and decried the term for undermining agency. Feminist perspectives highlight its disproportionate application to women, potentially perpetrating stereotypes. And comparisons to other cases underscore variability. For example, the Patty Hearst situation, where Patty Hearst's involvement with her kidnappers raised brainwashing debates, while Natasha Kampusch's mixed feelings after 8 years of captivity illustrates long-term effects. Culturally, the syndrome influences media, from films like the 2018 Stockholm to discussions of domestic abuse and cults. Modern relevance extends to human trafficking, emphasizing careful crisis negotiations and victim agency over disorder labels. So, in conclusion, the 1973 Norrmalmstorg robbery remains cornerstone for the underlying Stockholm syndrome. And the hostages' defense of Olsen and Olsen, well, their refusal to testify and ongoing contact reveals the profound interplay of fear, dependency, and connection while in captivity. So this case informs psychological research and crisis management, reminding us of the complexities of human response to trauma. All right, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. A little recap. We always hear about the Stockholm syndrome and how it may affect somebody, but did you ever know exactly how it came about? Well, I did, and I was there. I even took a picture in front of the bank. It's no longer a bank. It's a clothing store now, but I can't find it in my collection of Swedish photos. But if I do, by the time this airs, we'll put it up. All right, that's all I have for today. Like I said, should be done with my trial shortly, but I wanted to give you something to tie you over until our next show. So thanks for watching, and remember, the Constitution matters.